Hi there. Just making sure this is streaming, getting all set up. So give me a second. And it's almost ready to go. Okay. All right, we're good. Fantastic. Hi there. Elizabeth Hughes here. Today, I want to start with a sort of stunning premise. And that is that medical training produces a legion of self-herding sheep. And I know it's not necessarily the most comforting thing to think about, especially if you are a physician or a dentist, a veterinarian, or a nurse, or anyone in the health field, anybody who's had an advanced level of training. This can apply to. And yes, in medical training, we learn a tremendous amount of technical things. You know, there's anatomy, physiology, histology, pharmacology, et cetera, et cetera. We are bombarded by an enormous amount of clinical information, facts, figures, data, things that we have to memorize, right? But that is not the only thing you learn in medical school. In fact, I will fully admit that I have forgotten a substantial amount of the information that I learned in medical school, a substantial amount. But what didn't leave me and what I haven't forgotten is the unspoken lesson of how to survive medical training. Those lessons that aren't taught in words, you're not sat down and given a lecture on it or a series of tests, but it is a way of being that you have to adopt in order to survive and be successful. And remember, when I say survive, I don't mean continuing to have your heart beat and breathing. I'm not talking survival in the physiologic sense. I'm talking about achieving success, getting through to the diploma, the board certification, et cetera, et cetera. It's that when I say survive, because ultimately that's what anyone who embarks on medical training wants, is to get to that successful end of able to practice medicine with a medical license. I'm going to take me as a very specific example, but I don't think that I'm all that off from what many people have experienced. So I figured out that I was going to be a doctor when I was 13 years old, right? I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it. And very rapidly, I figured out what was necessary. For me, it was first step, I had to go to a better high school. I was in middle school at the time. I was, in seventh grade at the time when I figured this out. And I knew that the place where I was going to go, maybe I was in eighth grade. It doesn't really matter. Doesn't matter. The place where I was going to go to high school was terrible. It was like a terrible high school with, I looked at what its graduation rate was. I figured out that I was going to need to go to a good college, and the only way to get into a good college was to go to a good high school. And so I got myself into a better high school. That included having to convince my parents to not only take me for interviews but pay tuition after I got myself a scholarship. They were going to have to be on board. And yes, they were on board with it. But if I hadn't said, we're going to do this, I don't think they would have done it. Honestly, I don't think they would have pursued it to the extent that I was interested in it. So, once I was in the good high school, there was, the good grades, to get the good college essays, to get the good recommendations, to get into the good college. And then once you're in college, there's certain classes that you have to take, and you have to take them in a certain order. You can't leave them all until the end. And you have to get a certain grade Because if you don't get a certain grade in organic chemistry, for instance, that doesn't reflect well on your possibility of getting into medical school. And maybe you'll have to go and take that at a different place or time if you want to take it outside of your normal schedule. Then there's the big MCAT test and the applications and the interviews and on and on. So this only intensifies when you were in medical school. As many hoops as you've jumped through, it only intensifies. These are the classes you must take. Very little choice, very little wiggle room. These are the exams you must pass. These are the grades you must get. These are the certification exams that come forward. This is the interview process, the application process for residency, for fellowship, whatever. But here's what I mean by this as being self-herding sheep. And I'm going to give an example of, if you've ever watched a sheepdog herding sheep. They will take sheep that might be all over a field or in one part of a field and move the sheep around an obstacle course, the sheepdogs do, and finally have them land in a pen that is way less comfortable than where they started out in a field, right? Get the sheep gathered up in a pen and enclosed. And this, it strikes me, is what medical school feels like. You go from box or pen to obstacle, jump over a hoop to get to another pen, find your way around an obstacle course to get to another pen, and none of it is ever really comfortable or satisfying. None of it is in a place that you'd ever want to stay. Just like the sheep in the pen, they don't want to be there. They want to be somewhere else. So they have to be forced and herded into the pen. Now, we as potential medical we as medical students and potential doctors do not actually want to stay in this mode of being in these uncomfortable situations. And when I say uncomfortable, I mean, no sleep, no food, no bathroom breaks, all of that stuff. But it was absolutely necessary. And the whole time, at least for me, while I was in medical school, there was this idea that once I jump through enough hoops, it will end. Once I jump through enough hoops and I get my board certification and I get my full licensure, it will end. But what I learned in this whole process is, on a really unspoken gut level, was to accept what it feels like to be in a pen. To accept what it feels like to be uncomfortable, to jump through hoops. And that gut lesson spoke much louder to me than anything I learned. So I found myself, self-herding sheep, I found myself going to places that felt like medical school or residency. And I don't mean in terms of, let's say, the physical location, even though I did practice where I did my residency for a while, but I mean in terms of that sense of, I don't really want to stay here. I'm waiting for when this discomfort, this sense of, I don't know what's wrong, but it's not right. It's not working for me. I'm waiting for that to end. I'm waiting for that magic moment when I will move to the next thing. But it doesn't come. This training to follow and get through a series of obstacles and accept all of these indignities, the ridiculousness, the rigid structure, those lessons stick around on a unrecognized, almost subconscious basis. And when people make choices when people leave medical school, when doctors graduate, finish residency, finish fellowship, finish whatever it is that you're doing, and go out into a job, they usually choose something that looks a lot like a pen or feels a lot like a pen that they were in before. And even if it doesn't look like it right to start with, it starts to feel like it in not that long. Because we've been trained to become self-herding sheep. We've been trained to go into places that feel a very specific way, even though we don't like it. Even though we don't like it very much, even though it's not sustainable, even though it feels off. And then we wonder, why? Why can't I make a change? Why does it feel like, or I've made a change? And I've had 4 different jobs, and, every 4 years, it starts to feel this way again. This is that subconscious programming, the real lessons that come through in medical school. Because I'm going to be honest, a cardiologist has a completely different working set of knowledge than me, a dermatologist, which is completely different from an orthopedic surgeon. We're all experts in these things, but we've all forgotten most of what these other fields, other than to know what's outside our purview. But we have this shared, common, internalized curriculum of tolerating what's uncomfortable because it's required of us to get through our training. And a huge part of why people are dissatisfied and why people move and make changes to try to find more professional satisfaction, a huge part of it is that you don't undo this subconscious imprinting that you have. So, but here's my suggestion. Look back at if you are happy with your job, if you are a physician, dentist, veterinarian, and you're thrilled with your job right now, turn this video off. Well, forward it to a friend who might not be happy, but turn this off because this doesn't apply to you. But if you are in any way or at any point, if you have felt like, oh, this doesn't fit, this isn't comfortable, this isn't right for me, I'd like to make a change. And especially if you made a change and found yourself back again in another place that felt so eerily familiar, even if it didn't look the same, even if you left academia to go into private practice, you left private practice to go into the government, or whatever it is, but if the feeling that it invokes in you feels the same, if there's the same set of bureaucratic mess, different faces, different topics, but the same level of bureaucratic mess, if there is the same level of personal dissatisfaction that you're having, go back and look and see how much of this self-herding sheep pattern you may have experienced for yourself. And also, don't get bummed out about it. Don't beat yourself up about it. You're not alone. And B, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. People don't think about their training like this. But know that there is a way out. There is a way to keep doing what you love in whatever form it is, practicing medicine or not practicing medicine, it doesn't really matter. But there is a way to get satisfaction not by changing where you are or what you do necessarily as a first step, but by unprogramming and looking at what's going on and what's coming up and undoing that imprinting, that subconscious curriculum you've been taught. All right, that's what I've got for now. Thank you for